Kids really need that undivided attention, and it can be in very small increments. And you'll notice when you give it to them consistently that attention seeking behavior diminishes in other areas, and it's easier for them to focus. I really want to encourage parents to say to you when they're finished, don't interrupt them, but when they're finished playing, to really be able to say, hey, I noticed that you put all of the pink animals in one corner and all of the red animals over here. Tell me more about that. I'm so curious about the work you are doing. Really show them that you value their play as work.
This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. Lizzie Assa is my guest today, and we'll be talking about how to create positive play environments for children and how to improve communication with our kids. Her master's is in education, and she's the founder of Workspace for Children. She's a wife and mother of 3, and she's been featured in the New York Times and Parents Magazine and the Wall Street Journal, and now here. We're so glad to have you, Lizzie.
I'm so glad to be here. This is my favorite conversation to have.
Well, I have been getting ready early for Christmas and wrapping presents for grandchildren, and toys have been top of the mind for me. But I've been thinking about a quote I heard that for a child, work is play and play is work. And I noticed that your Instagram handle and your concept is workspace for children rather than play space. Tell us about that.
Sure. So it started about 10 years ago, and we actually had a physical workspace for children in our basement studio of my home where I would set up play and use my expertise in play and early childhood development and set up play activities for children while their caregivers and grown-ups sat around and watched. And I would talk the adults through what was happening, what were they seeing. And the concept behind it was really to help adults understand that they can trust their children to play. They don't need to do it for them, because oftentimes we, as the well-meaning adult, we get in the way, and then our children aren't developing the play skills that they need and deserve.
What are some ways that well-meaning adults get in the way of children playing?
So think about when you play with your child or your grandchild and they have a toy. More than likely, most adults will come over and say, what does the cow say? What does it do? Does it moo? Does it do this? Turn the head this way. And we show them what to do instead of pausing and allowing the child the opportunity for self-discovery. And oftentimes what we'll find when we can pause and wait for the child to show us their experience with the material or the toy or the vision of whatever it is that they're seeing, it's oftentimes not what we thought it was. It's oftentimes actually deeper and more engaged than we ever thought was possible. So on the flip side, I'll tell you a quick story. When my daughter was 2, she was counting little grapes at the table and she was putting them in a bowl, and she was saying 1, 2, 1. And instead of continuing 3, 4, she said 1, 2, 1, 2. And then eventually she said, I did it. Now, her idea of play was filling all the grapes into the bowl. If I had interrupted and said 3, 4, 5, I was taking her focus away from her initial idea. She was self-directing her own play, and that was filling a bowl, which is so developmentally appropriate for a 2-year-old. But as adults, we want to use everything as a teachable moment and correct them and jump in. But a lot of times what happens is that we break their focus and take it somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Well, how can you tell that a child is ready for this more independent play? And let's talk about specific ways we can get them started on it if they're not doing it already.
Sure. So I'm always telling the parents that I work with, you can start exactly where you are. It's never too late. You can always adjust your parenting to meet the needs of your child right now. So if they've never played independently and now you want them to, that's great. They can start now. So I just want to relieve that kind of guilt and anxiety I know a lot of parents have. I mean, I'm a parent myself. I get it. And so I think if you have a young baby and you would like to implement this kind of thinking, it just is as simple as, instead of constantly waving the toy in their face and peekabooing them constantly, it's really pausing and waiting and noticing, what do they see? What are they looking at? Allowing that time for them to just gaze out the window, allowing time for them to stay in their crib for an extra minute or two before running in to rescue them. I mean, even, you were saying yourself you're a grandmother, and you can think about when there's a baby. When I was a young mom, the second I heard my kids on the monitor, I ran in to get
Mhm.
them. But in retrospect, I wish that I had given them a beat, because sometimes what you find out is, they start to, fuss and whine to tell you, hey, I'm awake. That's how they communicate, right? But they don't necessarily need rescuing. Then they might start to stretch and see their arms and their hands, and then they're playing with their hands. And when we run right in and rescue, we're taking that opportunity away from them.
Mm.
Now, if you have an older child, say 4, 5, 6, and they're not used to entertaining themselves, they're not used to directing their own play, sure, it's going to be a little bit trickier, right? They're used to having you entertain them. And a lot of times parents feel frustrated and their own guilt gets in the way. So they'll start to say things like, you should be able to do this. You just go play. You should be able to play. Look at all these toys. I bought you this. You have this. Instead, we want to really meet them where we are and say to them, hey, this is tricky. You're used to using the iPad. You're used to mom or dad playing the game with you. And now I'm saying it's your job to do it yourself. That's really different, right? So we want to meet them where we are instead of shame, blame, and guilt for either party, right? The other thing parents can do is just start to set up their environment to support their children. So if we're saying we are not going to be the prime source of entertainment, we can't take the leap, right, for our kids to just know how to do it. They need a supportive bridge, right? And so we can start to use your environment. So what do I mean by that? For example, say you have a 4-year-old and it's really tricky for her to play without mom or dad, right? We are going to think about, what does this child love? Okay, say she's really interested in trucks. I'm going to take her trucks out of the playroom. I'm going to bring them into the kitchen where I am and put them on the floor right next to me so that she can see me. I'm right here. I'm right next to her, but she's working and playing with her toys and I'm right here. Right? I'm not going to interrupt her play. And when she says, hey, mommy, you'll be the dump truck, I'm going to say, oh, you wish I would be the dump truck, but it's your job right now. After I'm finished with the dishes, then I can come and play dump truck. So it's just going to be those small increments of waiting time, just the same way it was with the example I gave you about the baby, until you build on that.
Yeah, I like how you said in another interview, um, "Oh, it's not my turn to be the lion, it's your turn." And, or say, "Oh, you forgot, we're doing something new today that's a little bit grown up. You're playing over there, and in 15 minutes, you're gonna come and tell me all about it."
That's right. And I like to call that closing the loop, right? So we want our kids, we want to support them right before they go off and play independently, right? We want to really fill their bucket with our undivided attention. And I don't mean like you're emptying the dishwasher and you're talking to them, or you're scrolling your phone and you're playing with them. I mean, you are really saying to them, right now for 10 minutes, it is just me and you. And even if the baby cries and even if the washing machine dings, I'm still just reading this book to you. Right? Kids really need that undivided
Mm.
attention, and it can be in very small increments. And you'll notice when you give it to them consistently that attention seeking behavior diminishes in other
Mm.
areas, and it's easier for them to focus. So then they, are going to do their playing. And then I really want to encourage parents to say to you when they're finished, don't interrupt them, but when they're finished playing, to really be able to say, hey, I noticed that you put all of the pink animals in one corner and all of the red animals over here. Tell me more about that. I'm so curious about the work you are doing. Really show them that you value their play as work.
I love that, and I think it can be good to give them something to do that you call work. I remember, um, getting 2 of my little granddaughters to with safe little children's knives to slice up apples. I said, "We have to make an apple dessert. I need help." And I just put it down on the open dishwasher door where they could get at it, put a cutting board and these 2 safe knives and apples and let them figure it out, and they just took off with it, and for 10 minutes, they were completely absorbed in it and did a
That's
good
right.
job, an adequate job,
Because children crave autonomy. They really want to be seen as the capable individuals that they
and they
are.
wanna
And so as
contribute, they knew
that's
they were
right.
contributing to the overall busy preparations for that meal.
And so to your point, you bring up something really important, but the more we can have our kids, instead of flipping on the light for them in their room, let them go get that stool and turn it on themselves. When the baby needs a diaper change, let the toddler run upstairs and get the diaper. When they feel like the expert at their life, they can also feel like the expert at their play, and they want to play independently. They want to play more and more and more.
Mhm. I realized, that it's good to think more in terms of giving kids tools than toys, things that can help them be capable.
That's right. But toys can also be seen as the tools of
Oh, yeah.
childhood, right? They are the tools for play. And so, yes, real tools are wonderful for kids. I'm a huge advocate for that. But we can also switch our mindset and say, blocks are a tool for play. Blocks are a
Yes.
medium that kids can use to express themselves, right? And that's how they process their
Yeah.
experiences. So the more open-ended your toy is, the more your child has the opportunity to play about their life.
I mean, a little tiara for a little girl can be a tool for building a whole, fantasy world, or just a mirror, um, and letting her play dress up, in front of the mirror, it can be a simple thing like that we need to think of as not just a toy, but something that contributes to their development.
Sure. Yeah. And that's why, like you can take that even a step further and offer them, a play silk or a blanket, and a mirror, right? Because that's when they really start to create their own costumes and their own ideas. And maybe they're going to use that blanket as a fort, or maybe they're going to wrap it around themselves as a costume, or maybe they're going to play peekaboo with it. And that's an example of how one material can mean so many different things to many different children.
Yeah. What are some of the toys, the items that you recommend for, say, a preschool age child?
Sure. Well, I love that, preschoolers typically are really learning more about the outside world. For a lot of them, it's the first time that they are in school away from their adults. They're thinking more about their peers. They're thinking more about how powerful their bodies are, how powerful their voices, how much impact they have on the world. And so we want to offer them toys that can reflect those things. So I was just recently sharing with someone about, heavy wooden hollow blocks are a wonderful toy for a preschooler that they'll use all the way through, grade school. And the reason is because preschoolers can really start to use these blocks either to build something like I've seen kids build a counter to play store, to really reflect that, or to pretend they're at a bus shelter, or, any of those things. But it can also be a stage if they are wanting to perform, which we know many 4 and 5 year olds love to
Yeah.
do. But it also gives them that input, that sensory input to do heavy work. Children in preschool are so invested in what their bodies can do
Mm,
physically, balancing, lifting, pushing, carrying. So I really love a large hollow block for a preschooler. The other thing you can think of, lots of preschoolers are starting to think a lot about writing and drawing more representationally. They're starting to realize, oh my gosh, when I draw, it actually looks like something. And so I love giving preschoolers, real pens and markers and thick paper. They really value that. They really see that they're not a baby anymore. They can use these real materials and they will rise to the occasion and really put effort into their work.
how about some important things for, say, mid-elementary children to have?
Sure. Middle elementary kids, again, I'm going to keep coming back to these open ended
Mhm.
materials. And so, for me, the best toy is the one that you're going to use year after year after year. So, again, that middle elementary those kids are still going to use those blocks. But instead of building a simple structure like a bus shelter or a counter for a store, they are now going to build complicated bridges. They're probably going to ask you for tape and scissors and pencils so they can make a working elevator for the bridge, or they can make signs and tape it to the building, right? We want to just keep helping them evolve their own work. So instead of thinking of sort of like, what can I buy them? It's kind of more, what tools and toys reflect their life experiences and interests?
Mhm. What about a child who's just very kinetic and, they don't build very successfully, they do like to knock down, they're just, into the big movements, the big sounds, um, for a preschool or a middle elementary, what kinds of activities can they do independently?
Yeah, so I love that question, and it's one that comes up so much in my work. And I think, really reflecting who your child is in their play space and in their materials, right? And so you are not going to give that child dainty magnetic tiles because that's going to frustrate them. They are going to start to build something and it's going to keep knocking down and they're going to be frustrated. Instead, I might give those kids large cardboard blocks because those are safe to knock down. Those are safe to like build really big and ram into them. That feels good. I would also be giving those kids, things that they can jump off, balance beams that they can make, anything that can help them move their body. We want to also think about those kids are often craving sensory input too. So maybe you're going to think about like a weighted stuffed animal or a heavy blanket for them to cozy up into. Um, Anything like that, and with space to move their body, getting them outside, thinking about toys for the outside is wonderful. A trampoline, if you feel safe with a trampoline, or even an area where they can jump off a rock into the grass, things where they can start to seek out the movements that their body craves naturally.
I liked one thing you were talking about elsewhere, when you have a climber in your house, that you can, certainly try to create an environment where they can do some climbing safely inside or out, but also just help them maybe have a stuffed animal that they teach how to climb or they tell them about climbing. I think that kind of resourcefulness is so important, and we need that.
Yes.
Um, how do you talk to a child when, uh, it hasn't gone well? They've made a kind of a mess of things, or they just can't go the 15 minutes or whatever you've set up
Yeah, of
for them.
course.
Do they yeah, I don't want them, to feel like a failure when it didn't go as you hoped.
Sure. So you're going to do a couple things. The first thing is we're not going to expect a child who's never played independently to suddenly play for 15 minutes successfully, right? You need to bridge that support, right? Again, with having them play next to you, having them practice, and maybe even like 5-minute increments. But even before that, what you can start to do is saying to them, when you notice them doing things independently, like say, for example, you have a child who really clings to you, who really follows you around, but you notice that they are sitting on the couch watching TV and you get up and leave to, go into the kitchen and get a snack and they don't follow you. When you come back, you can say, hey, you know what? This is different. It used to be tricky for you to stay by yourself in the living room, and now you're doing it. You're really growing up. So you want to sort of start to build their self view as someone who's independent. Then you want to work on your environment, right? So you want the environment to reflect their interests, toys that reflect their interests nearby to you. Um, and then finally, say that you've started with independent play and you just are like, you ask them to go play for 10 minutes and it's like 3 minutes in and it's not happening. It's always okay to go in and say, hey, do you need some help? It seems like you're having a hard time getting started, or it seems like you're having a hard time figuring out what to do, and kind of scaffold for them. If I were you, I might, look around the playroom and, oh, I see. I remember the game that you played yesterday with magnetic tiles. I'm remembering that. I'm going to pull those out just in case you decide. So you just like want to scaffold for them and support. And it's always okay if it was a hard time to say, today was really hard. Learning new things is hard. And independent play is a skill. And you're still learning, and I'm still learning. And we can try again
Mhm.
tomorrow. Do you want to practice together now? Things like that.
I like that. I was dealing with one of my grandchildren, and they were trying to do something and they failed, and they tried to do it again and they failed, and I could see the frustration building, and there was a meltdown imminent, and I said, "Do you wanna give yourself another chance?" And they said, "Yes." Who doesn't want to give themselves
Right.
another chance? And, so, you can send them back to the environment or, just cuddle and say, "Hey, this was really tricky. I bet tomorrow will be better." And,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you can even do things like practice. A lot of times this sounds so silly, but you can take two of their toys and have them one of their toys pretend to try to play alone and get frustrated and so mad, and the other toy can be the mom that comes in, and you can switch roles. You can just sort of preview what it feels like with the stuffed animals. That's usually a lot safer for kids, feels safer
Mhm.
for children. um but even things like building their frustration tolerance and building that up, like you're wiring them to build their frustration tolerance, right? To say,
Mhm.
hey, let's give it another chance. Do you want to give it a chance, or do you want to try something different? It's up to you. You get to pick, you get to decide.
I love that. Um, I'm learning to say around kids, "I wonder," rather than, "Why don't you do this?" Or, "Well, this would work better," to say, "I wonder what color your Play-Doh you're gonna pick," or, "I wonder if you will wanna play outside this afternoon," or, "Wonder what kind of crafts you'll do at in your class," or whatever.
Yes, and one thing you can do with that really is, before they're gonna play independently or before they're gonna go outside, is really starting to say things to them like you said. I'm thinking about you being outside, and I'm remembering that there's a sandbox and there's a climber and there's an area of grass. I wonder what you're gonna do when you're out there. I wonder what you're gonna need. Will you need books, or will you need stuffed animals? Are you hoping to bring blankets out to sit on, or are you thinking you might sit on the grass? And that's just kind of forecasting for them and helping them think ahead.
Mhm.
And they might not do any of those things, but it helps them start to get in that mind frame so that when they get out there, they're not just like,
Yeah,
they've already started to think.
I love that. Your kids are blessed to have you as their mom.
Oh, thank you.
I saw some other, suggestions about when a child isn't working in their environment and things to say. You said, "It's too hard to play here, I see. I think we're gonna have to leave together now," or something. Or, "Let's step away from here and figure out what you need."
Yes, I mean, sometimes the situation, and this doesn't have to be involved with independent play, but you might be at the playground or at a birthday party or at a family function where it's just too much.
Mhm.
It's overstimulating. Kids can't process all of these lessons we want to teach them when they're taking in all the eyes of everyone around them, and their body feels hot and sweaty, and they might be thirsty or hungry, or maybe they're ready for a nap. Anything that you're saying, they're not taking in, right? You're just adding to the chaos. And so sometimes as the grown up, you need to say, you know what, I'm your grown up. I'm going to decide it's time for us to go, and then let it go. And later, when everyone's calm, that's when you can start to say, hey, I'm still thinking about what was happening at the playground earlier. That was hard. That looked like it was hard for you. Your face looked like this. Your body looked like this. I was starting to feel worried too, and then just pausing and letting them give you their experience. How did they experience the events, right? Because oftentimes it's very
Mhm.
different than how we experience them. And so giving kids the opportunity to revisit a scenario and tell you what was happening for them, that's so valuable, not only in helping them process through it, but in helping them build connection to you. Like, hey, my grown up really cares about my experience. My grown up really, instead of, most adults are going to jump in and say, you need to share. That wasn't nice. I saw you do this. But like, let's take it back. Let's take a beat and step back, right? And ask them, well, what was that experience like for you? What was the, and then oftentimes you're going to be able to see why your child behaved in a certain way and go at it in that direction instead of coming down at them with shaming or punishing.
Mhm. Yeah. I read a study of, Japanese mothers in grocery stores with their children and comparing it to American mothers and watching how the mothers dealt with misbehavior, disruptive behavior by the child in that setting. It said the Japanese mothers tended to say, the other people in this store are trying to concentrate. They can't pay attention to what they're buying when you're making noise. And the American mothers would just say, "Shut up." And,
Well, I don't know if either of those responses would be mine.
yeah, but, I think given the age of the child and what else you're doing, teaching them some ethical consideration of other people, it is part of play, and that kinda leads me to, how do you design good environments for a child when there's a sibling in the picture, when there are other children, that are gonna share that workspace?
Sure. Well, I want to start by saying any workspace that you have in your home is wonderful. You don't need a separate playroom filled with wooden toys in order to have children who play productively. That is not true. That is a myth that the internet and, the rise of social media has shown so many parents that that's how it has to be in order for your child to play, or it's not going to happen. And that's not true. In fact, I am working on my first book right now, and a big section of it is about building play pockets throughout your home. And that lends itself to your question, right? Because we can have some play spaces with open ended materials that are wonderful for both ages of children, right? So your 3-year-old is going to be using blocks, your 3-year-old is going to be using dolls or stuffed animals or magnetic tiles, and your 7-year-old is also going to be able to engage with those materials. They're going to look very different in the way they engage with them, because their developmental stage is different. But when you have a shared play space, the best thing you can do is basic, sturdy, open-ended materials. Now, in order to have lots of productive independent play and have your child sort of start to use play to help them figure out their own interests and passions, you can also start to curate smaller spaces throughout your home. So say, my oldest is an aviation nut. He has been since birth. He's actually 17 and he just got his private pilot license.
Wow.
I mean, this is a kid who has been playing and studying about airplanes since he was 2 years old. And he had two little sisters who would have loved to crash down every airport he ever made. And so, for him, it was in his room. He had a special, sort of area for his Legos and his airplane toys that he didn't have to share and that he didn't have to worry about those getting knocked down. Now, not everyone has, each child has their own bedroom, but you can even do things like, when the children were little, I would say I would put my oldest up sitting actually on the table to work with like his small parts and Legos, on a tray that had like a lip to it so that the little ones wouldn't choke if a Lego, slid. And then, the baby was maybe in the high chair with some Duplos, and the preschooler was on the floor working, right? So they're all sort of working with the same materials. Mom is still in the same room, kind of engaging with everyone while also doing her own thing, but their space is protected.
Mhm. I had one, grandchild the other day, say I mentioned something that I was gonna get, and he said, "Will it have my name on it?" And I thought, "Oh, he's a middle child. I wonder if he's just wanting a little more identity."
Yeah. You can really use that too to sort of sell the idea of independent
Mm,
play to kids, right? Because it is actually a time where they don't need to compromise with their siblings. They don't need to share. They can use their own ideas and make mistakes without maybe big brother teasing at them or laughing at them. They don't have to fall back on sibling dynamics, right? It's really a time for just them. And research will show that when children play solo, they are so much more deeply
mm,
engaged because they're playing at the optimal zone of development for their own personal development. Now, I'm not saying that kids should play alone all the time, but that is a great benefit for children who are a middle child or a toddler who is really frustrated by their newly walking or crawling baby sister that keeps not getting in their space and getting in their way. Quiet time and independent playtime is wonderful for building that individuation.
You're mentioning quiet time, reminds me that, you can transition a child from nap time to an independent playtime. That seems
That's
like a
right.
time slot that would be very natural.
Yes.
Do they need to have their, movements restricted with independent play? I mean, can you even have them in a playpen or, take off
Sure.
a
I mean, listen,
boundary?
my biggest thing for parents is you know your child best, and it's so important to do what you feel safe and comfortable with. Now, if you are lucky enough to have a child, a preschooler who naps in their own crib or bed kind of consistently and they're giving up that nap, you can use that, right? Because they are already in that routine of I go in my bed and I nap. Um, and for an hour and I'm alone in my room, right? And so use that. And I love to say to a preschooler giving up a nap, you are really starting to grow up, and sometimes your body tells you it's time to fall asleep, and sometimes your body tells you it's not that tired, and you get to decide now because you're 4. And so I'm going to put these puzzles on the end of your bed, and I'm going to put your favorite stuffed animals in a circle on the floor, and you can decide if you want to fall asleep for your quiet time, or you feel like you want to play for your quiet time. That's up to you. Um, that's one way to transition kids from nap to quiet time.
Mhm.
I did that with each of my 3 kids, and I will tell you, we did it for years. I mean, even once they were in full-time school, I mean, I'm talking they were in middle school, and on the weekends, we would still midday be like, "Family quiet time, everyone to their own
Mhm.
rooms." And, but they loved it. It was when, my son would get really involved with his aviation things. My daughter was very into art and design, and that's when she knew she had carved out time every single day to do that. And it really helps them build up their own skills and who they are and who they were becoming.
Like Anne of Green Gables says, it gives you scope for the imagination.
That's right.
What kind of praise works well for when they are doing independent play well?
So I love the idea of first not interrupting. So if your child is playing well independently, do not go in and say, "Tell me what you're doing. What's this? What's that?" Instead, I would do something like let it play its course. And later at the dinner table, when you're with the whole family, saying out loud, to your partner or to another sibling, "Gosh, today, I could hear Sammy upstairs in his room playing with his animals for such a long time. It was so interesting." And waiting to see, is Sammy going to say, "Yeah, and I was doing this and that." It's such a moment of pride for them to really hear someone mention something that they did. The other thing I might do is say, you were working on coloring during your quiet time today. Would it be okay if I ran upstairs and got what you were working on and took a look at it and we showed everyone? If your kid likes that, tell me more about it. Maybe I could write down your words about what this picture is
Oh, I
about if
love
you
that,
want me
yeah.
to. Just sort of extending and engaging with them around the play that they did. Really thinking about, instead of just saying, "Hey, good job. You stayed in your room for 40 minutes," is very different, than saying, "I'm so interested in what you were working on. Do you mind sharing with our family?" Or, "So and so wasn't sure what to do today. They're still learning. Would it be okay if you kind of told us a little bit more about what you do during your quiet time?" Really letting them be the expert of their own time.
Mhm. I, saw you said one thing that can stimulate a child to independent play is just to put a toy or 2 in a place they're not used to seeing it, and
Yes,
it makes a new environment for
it
the
does.
child
I
and
mean,
the toy.
oftentimes playrooms or bedrooms, they can be really overcrowded and really overstimulating. And it can be overwhelming to a busy parent to be like, "Oh, now I have to go clean out the whole playroom and make it nice so that my kid's going to play." And like, you don't have to do that. What you can do is think about, what does my kid use the most? Go ahead into the playroom and pull it out. I remember putting a marble tree at the bottom of on the landing of our stairs in our old house when the kids were small. And I just put it there and I didn't say anything. And then I saw my preschooler was putting a marble down, running upstairs to get her shoes on, and coming back down. And she was racing the marble. And I was like, well, that is one way to get our shoes on and get out the door. But they will think of the most innovative things, right? She wouldn't have thought to use that marble tree that way in the playroom. In fact, they weren't using it at all. And once I moved it out, then the other kids saw that. And then someone else went to their room to get some other marbles. And all of a sudden, it had this whole new life around it.
Mhm.
You could also take things and, kids want to be where we are. So if your child loves, Paw Patrol or Bluey figures, bring them into the kitchen, set them up at the table like they are eating breakfast or they are, doing whatever, and don't say a word. Just let your child come down and discover them and start playing. Take a puzzle that they love, put it on a child size table, and just put the first three pieces together for them. Just a little invitation to get started and do their
Mhm.
work. You don't need to say, I did this, so come play here. Just let them discover it, put it in the room where you are, and they will be busy in no time.
I notice you suggested that one thing you can set up is something that kind of expands on or reinforces an experience you just had, like just going to the zoo, and you can just put out a few, animals or magnetiles that make the cages or something like that and just let it happen.
Yeah, I another example of that is even, if parents who have just sent their preschoolers off to school for the first time, they want to say like, "What'd you do at school? What'd you do at school? Tell me what you did at school." But if you take an open-ended dollhouse and you drag that out of the playroom and you put that on your coffee table with a few people figures, I can almost guarantee you that your child is going to start playing school at the dollhouse and you're going to know everything they do at school,
Well,
right? Because kids reflect their life experiences, they process them through play. And so when we can take toys and mimic their life experiences, like the animals from the zoo, you're going to learn so much more about their perspective on the world.
mhm.
And that helps you connect with your child on such a deeper level. Independent play, when I started teaching independent play, I really was doing it because I was teaching parents how to win back time for themselves, right? I was a busy mom. I wanted to show parents how to get time back in their day so they weren't frazzled all the time. But what I really learned throughout working with families was that not only does independent play give you back time for yourself, it helps you develop such a secure, connected relationship with your child because they start to see themselves as so capable and independent, and so do you.
100%. I love it. Well, any final guidance on handling the influx of toys and dazzling, beguiling things that they may be approaching with Christmas or Hanukkah or just being off from
Sure.
school?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, I feel like the best toy you can give is one that they're still going to be using next year at this time, right? So you can choose as, the grandparent or the parent, as the gift giver, whether you want your child to have that initial 10-minute wow factor or you want to have a slow burn, right? And so while you might give your child a set of blocks and they're not like, oh, wow, thanks, Grammy, you know, they are going to, over the course of the years, look what I built, look what I made. Remember when we went to the museum? Well, now I made this, and that to me is such a bigger gift than that one bright moment you get as they
Mhm.
unwrap things under the tree.
Yeah, one thing I plan to do with my grandchildren is make a Santa's workshop and got some small corrugated boxes and some golf tees and a few little mallets. And I'm
Oh,
just
that
gonna
sounds
let
so
them
much fun.
hammer golf tees in and say, "We need to decorate these boxes."
Oh, they will love that. And there's actually a new toy that is out and it's called Make Do, I believe. And it is child safe cardboard cutters and fasteners. So check that
Oh,
out. That is a
yeah,
wonderful
that'd be
gift.
perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, Lizzie, you're so fun to talk to, and I really admire how you teach us to be a student of the children that we love, and, I benefit from your ideas every time I come across them. Where can people find more?
Well, thank you for your kind words. You can find me on Instagram at the Workspace for Children. On my website, I'm newly on Substack, which I'm enjoying so much. It's more long form content where we can really get at the meat of independent play. So you can find me on Substack. Everything is at the Workspace for Children. And I have a book coming out next fall, and it's called But I'm Bored, The Complete Guide to Independent Play. So that's with Putnam. So keep an eye out for that.
Congratulations on that. We will look for But I'm Bored next year. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye. Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LeahFarish.